Well, hello and welcome to another wilderness tamed gardening video. So in this one we're looking at beds and borders, which are the furniture of your outside room, if you like, the carpet being the lawn. Oh yes. If you've got bare soil, any area of exposed soil, it's going to attract what you would class as weeds. Stuff's going to blow in and germinate. So the ideal border or bed, island bed, is one that is filled with plants that you want. If you've got a brand new garden, which you're prepared to invest as much money as you can comfortably afford in filling the borders, pack them out, because once a border is filled, you have a lot less work to do. There's a lot less weeding to do because there's no bare soil, and the plants you want will outcompete the weeds. The work you do in weeding is minimal, and the work you do in general maintenance is also pretty much down to once a year. If it's herbaceous perennials, they're going to need cutting back in the winter or late autumn because they look scraggy and they die off anyway. So cut them down to the ground and that's it. Job's done. If you've got shrubs, mixed shrubs in the border, most shrubs only require pruning once a year, sometimes once every 3 or 4 years. And we'll get onto pruning in another video. That might be the topic for the next one. But generally, yeah, once a year max for most shrubs, and trees nowhere near that often. I mean, the initial kind of input in effort, obviously the preparation of the ground and the whether it be sowing of seeds or planting of plug plants or stuff you bought from a nursery, then yeah, there's a fair amount of effort in that, but it's nice and it's rewarding. The trick with stocking a garden is don't go in the Easter bank holiday weekend or during sort of any time between March and April and make that year bulk garden shopping trips, because at that time of the year there's only the spring and early summer flowering stuff available. You're not going to see what's in flower later in the year. What I would suggest is, for 1 year, go to the garden centres or the nurseries or shop online at least once a month. Then you're going to see things in flower at different times of the year. It's going to give you an idea of what's going to look good in your garden and how to follow one thing with another. Now, a lot of people with the old-fashioned sort of beds and borders where there's lots of soil, they'll have clumps of bulbs. And the argument I hear against bulbs is, once they've finished flowering, they look untidy. Yeah, so once they've finished flowering, there's other stuff growing and getting ready to flower after them, if you've planted out the border right. So it doesn't matter what the bulbs look like once they've finished flowering, because you've got lots of other stuff growing and covering them. So they can just die away naturally and happily, and who cares? You're not going to notice, because you're then distracted by all the nice sort of late spring and early summer stuff that's coming up. Things like winter aconite and ranunculus, what's the little yellow flowered thing, tiny little buttercup that comes and it like can cover the ground, forget-me-nots and all these small early spring flowering perennial plants that can sort of swamp the ground, and they look fantastic. They create a really colourful carpet. Within a couple of months of them flowering, they've completely died away and been reabsorbed back into the soil. So there's no evidence of them ever being there. And again, they might look a bit untidy as they're sort of withering and dying away. But if you've planted that area up with other stuff that comes later in the year, you're not going to notice. It shouldn't be an issue. So buy in bulk. Usually try and seek out, just take a bit of time to seek out some good wholesale nurseries if you can, that supply online, and there are plenty of them, and just stretch the budget and buy as much as you can afford each month, rather than trying to get everything all in one go. Classic English garden borders generally consist of what I mentioned earlier, which is occasional plants with lots of bare soil around them. And it's so kind of upsetting to see, because it just smacks of a lack of imagination, tight as a crab's face when it comes to budget. And I even hear people say things like, oh, well, the more plants you've got on the border, the more work it is. No, it isn't. It really, really isn't. It's less work. So look at this one, for example. Here's a border with lots of gaps around the plants. All the shrubs are neatly trimmed and formalised, bare soil around all of them. So what do you think that person does, maintenance-wise, the most? What's their most regular job? It's weeding between the plants, between the little conifers and the heathers and the shrubs and the occasional perennial plants they've got in there. They're weeding all the time, and whether it be, and the different kinds of weed control, again, this could be a subject in itself. So there's the physical, which is hoeing and digging out the weeds, spot spraying between the plants with a herbicide, a bit frowned upon these days, and there's the risk of drift affecting the plants that you want to keep, and mulching. A bit of a myth to mulching. They say, oh yeah, put wood chips down, that'll keep the weeds down. It really doesn't. It really, really doesn't. It would have to be several metres thick, and even then, seeds are going to blow into it and root in it. So, and gravel. Sort of slate chippings and gravel and stuff like that. Gravel is one of the best mediums for getting seeds to germinate in. It's unbelievable. If you've got a gravel, ask anybody with a gravel path, gravel driveway, or a gravel bed in their garden what the biggest problem is, and they will tell you it's the weeds constantly blowing in and germinating, because just a few centimetres down from that top layer of gravel is all that lovely silt and dust and dirt and soil that's blown in over the years, which creates a lovely humid rooting medium for seeds. So yeah. So here's another border. What work do you think is required in this one? Very little. Very little. Again, cut down at the end of the year. Actually, with the geraniums, which are the purple flowered ones with the spotted leaves, it's geranium phaeum, I think, with a PH. You can cut them down as soon as they're finished flowering. Cut them down, and you get a second spring of growth and a bit more flower with them. The other pink and white flowering symphytum, that just seems to flower all year. There's seldom a month goes by when that's not in flower, to varying degrees. So it's a splendid ground cover plant, excellent for dry shade under a tree and stuff like that, which is where those are, right underneath a huge sycamore. Think about what you want from your bed and border. Think about what you want from your lawn. We've talked about that in a previous video, and go for mass planting and cover the seasons. The thing I usually start with if I'm planning a new garden for somebody is think about winter interest. Autumn and winter are the two trickiest seasons to fill with colour and interest. Okay, so autumn, the obvious things are like autumn colour in some of the shrubs, and berries, and late summer flowering stuff. Echinaceas, the sedums, heleniums, asters, that kind of thing, as perennials. Some of the shrubs, good autumn flowering shrubs. Euonymus europaeus is a great one, and the autumn colour is magnificent. Some of the late flowering clematis as well, the group twos, the sort of late summer flowering ones will continue on until kind of the first frosts. Fuchsias, hardy outdoor fuchsias, very late to come into leaf and grow, but I've seen those flowering into December. Yeah, so good value autumn plant. Much as I loathe and detest roses, the really old-fashioned Rosa caninas and other musk roses and things, they're pretty good value as far as the amount of flower you get, the length of the flowering season, the robustness, the sort of the lack of maintenance they need, and their resistance to pests and diseases. I would steer clear completely of any hybrid teas or floribundas because they're just more bother than they're worth, really. But each to their own. If you like roses, good for you. If you like to deal with them and do all that work that's needed to keep them looking good, good on you. Best of luck to you. But and that's the other thing. There are certain plants that require a lot more maintenance than others to keep them looking good. And the more exotic you go, the more you're kind of asking for that kind of thing. Winter, right? You've got a fair amount of stuff that can give you a little bit of interest in the winter. So there are some winter flowering shrubs, and some, but not many, winter flowering ground cover plants. Some of the shrubs off the top of my head, there's Lonicera papuzii, it's a winter flowering scented thing. Hammamelis mollis, the witch hazel, of which there are sort of several varieties. Sarcocoga, is it Humulus still? There are others. Some of the daphnes, like amazing scents of some of those. There's the winter flowering jasmine, Jasminum nudiflorum, which is the little yellow flower. And the stem colour is quite interesting on that. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't consider is stem colour. So there's things like the dogwoods and some of the willows are specifically grown because they've got bright red or bright orange or bright yellow stems or black stems or whatever it is. The trunks of some trees are pretty splendid during the winter. Obviously there's the birch, springs to mind straight away, the bright white. That's usually the Italian, imported Italian grown Japanese hybrids. The native birch though, the downy and the pendula, both attractive trees stem wise. Some of the more exotic acers, the snake bark maples are quite nice to look at during the winter. Bit of interest there. And then, as I say, the dogwoods and the willows. So yeah, stems, buds even, like some trees and some shrubs have really interesting buds. And that's not something most people would think about. Winter aconite, is it Aranthus hymalis, and related varieties, and then your snowdrops, followed by other winter things or early spring things. So you kind of get over that hurdle of the dark months with a few things of interest. So spring, that's an easy month to fill. Summer, easy month, season, and summer, easy to fill with colour. Some plants, a lot of people will buy plants that they think will look good together, but because they haven't really researched them, one will thrive, the other will struggle. Do your research, find out where plants come from naturally, where they occur, and find out the conditions they thrive in. Be very careful as well with stuff that can get a little bit rampant. There are some plants which will become very dominant very quickly in a border or a bed situation. Even in a meadow, wildflower meadow situation, there are certain plants that can be a bit thuggish, so you want to kind of restrict them. Just be aware that you might have to deadhead them as soon as they've finished flowering, because if they start to seed, that's it, they can just go berserk, and then you've got a bit of a problem because they outgrow all the other multitude of interesting little things that you want to grow. Okay, so something else to bear in mind. So to sum up, Plant densely. Don't leave any bare soil because that just adds to your weeding. And cover every season. Have fun, happy planting, and I'll see you in the next video, which hopefully will be a little bit sooner than in a month's time. Sorry for the delay in getting this out, but you know, it's life, it gets busy. Anyway, enjoy your garden and enjoy the